Hey, friends. We are back with another episode with Alex Schadenberg. He is the lovely human that runs the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. You guys have seen him on the show a bajillion times, and you will see him a bajillion more. And yeah, I said bajillion like it was a real word, but that's okay because nobody seems to trust the things I say when it comes to euthanasia. So let's hit it nice and hard. I want to begin starting with the newest article with Dr. Joel Zivit, who has been on the show, whose testimony is the one that I spoke about on Jordan Peterson. On the Med page today, he came out with a great article that I think is really important to discuss, like Alex reiterated to me. And the title is To Britain on Legalizing Assisted Death, Proceed with Caution. Canada offers a cautionary tale. So, Alex, why don't we talk about why this is so damn important to be reading?
Well, Zivit's actually responding, as you know, to the UK, and the UK is debating legalizing assisted suicide, and hopefully they have their wits about them and actually reject this idea. But what he's doing is he's going through what's happening in Canada, etc., and other places, and then he does something very important, and I think it's very important because of the controversy of how the dying with dignity people, the euthanasia doctors in Canada, were attacking you personally for actually saying the same things as you were talking about what Zivit was talking about, how people die by euthanasia. And this is very important. And I'm just going to quickly read this to you. He said, in Canada, the majority of euthanasia is done via an injection or substantial dosages of anesthetic agents, propofol, midazolam, and paralytic rocurum. Now, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong too, so sorry about that.
How
And he
dare
explains, yeah, well, there we go. I'm just repeating what Zivit wrote, which is he's absolutely correct. He's writing propofol and midazolam are likely not the cause of death. Instead, it's likely rocurum. Now, why is he saying this? Because we're talking about how people would die by euthanasia, and they want to sell it as this peaceful death. They want to tell you that this is all about death with dignity, and he says, well, no, instead it's likely the rocurum, leading to death by muscle paralysis. Because what does this drug do? It paralyzes you, and then it leads to your lungs stopping from working, and then it fills up with fluid, and you die then by drowning. It's like a death by drowning. So why is this so important? And I have to first give you some history. First of all, when the Netherlands first legalized euthanasia back in 2001, and then it came into place in 2002, there was quite a few articles written about how there was about the one article talked about how 17% of these euthanasia deaths there was bad things that occurred. Someone might have taken hours and hours and hours to die. Somebody else went into convulsions. They received the lethal poisons and they threw up, and they had all these things happening. And so, what they did is they added to the whole lethal poison cocktail the need to paralyze someone.
Correct.
So how they do the euthanasia is they put you into coma, they paralyze you, and this is how they do it in order for you to look like a peaceful death. But does that actually mean it's a peaceful death? And he says this leads to a death by paralysis. Once paralyzed, MAID deaths will appear outwardly calm and peaceful. However, this is essentially a death by asphyxiation. Now that's a horrible way to die.
It's terrifying.
We all know that.
Yeah.
And then he says the U.S. death penalty commonly uses an intravenous cocktail known as, it's a lethal injection they use. This cocktail is strikingly similar to the Canadian MAID drugs that are used, or poisons as I call them. Studies show that lethal injection can cause rapid accumulation of fluid in the lungs. Prisoners feel that they are drowning as they die, far from a dignified death by MAID, and may be highly distressing. Now, someone would say to you, but Alex, well, why do you care? These people are first put into coma, and they look peaceful. Why do you actually care? Because it's the whole thing from the beginning where they're selling this concept of a death with dignity. They're telling people that this is a good idea because you can avoid a painful death. And most people are asking for this. It's not because they're seeking their right to die, as someone would tell you. It's because they have fear. They're a human being with fear. Right. That's normal. I would have some fear too. I'm a human being. I understand this issue of fear. So then they're selling you this supposed peaceful death. But in fact, when you're in coma, are you actually not experiencing the drowning? And the answer is no, you are experiencing it. You just can't respond.
Correct. And
They,
that's the thing we do understand about comas. We do understand that when somebody is put into a medically induced coma, or they experience being comatose due to a car accident, a traumatic injury, we have a ton of anecdotal evidence where individuals have stated, I could hear you in the room talking to me. I could feel
yes,
when you grabbed my hand. I could remember when people were coming and going and changing my bandages and all of those things. So for them to sit there and say that when somebody is in a coma and say it emphatically that we know unequivocally 100% that they are not experiencing pain is not only a lie, it should be challenged in a court because we have no prior evidence to prove that the brain is not feeling pain the same way somebody is in a coma. So
right.
the fact that Dying with Dignity and all of these other individuals can not only advertise, because this is an important difference, right, Alex, is when
Yep.
somebody advertises something, you are making a legal claim, and a legal claim can be challenged in a court of law. As if I were to say to you, my bracelet cures cancer from Brass and Unity, but we know for a fact that my bracelet doesn't. If somebody does not challenge that, I can put it on a bottle, but it will always leave me open to a legal issue. So what I want to understand is, how does Dying with Dignity and all of these other pro-death cults, notice I said cults,
They're
they
a
are
culture,
able,
right?
they
Yeah.
are, how is it that they are able to state with such conviction that it is a painless death with dignity?
Well, in fact, you see, they want that to be the understanding, whether it's true or not. So it's the same thing as the big lie. Now you served in the military, and you're wondering, how come these people who are, if even if you just consider the Second World War, all these atrocities that happened, and you would say, how come these people or human beings are doing this? For many of them, it's because they bought into the big lie. They were
Right,
told over and over again that this was an acceptable thing to do. And in
right.
fact, there was nothing acceptable about it. So if you're told something over and over and over again, I often talk about euthanasia in the same way for another reason. If you just go back a little bit in Canadian history and look back at what happened during 2014 and 2015, before we
Mm,
legalized euthanasia in Canada, the media in Canada inundated us with stories. And you might remember a lot of those
yes,
stories, but we were inundated with these stories. And so you have all these people who came to this concept that we have to legalize this because we have two choices: a bad death or legalizing euthanasia. But of course, there weren't two choices. But
right.
that's what they convinced us of. So then you have all these people who have bought into this concept because they heard the story over and over and over again. They,
Yes.
they came to believe something to be true that was never true.
Well, what do we understand about advertising, Alex? We understand that it takes, what is it? Before it used to be 7 to 12 touches to get somebody to convert. Well, this is no different than what the current government and
Yep.
the Canadian government over an extended period of time, as they started to get to the point of legalization with the Carter case, we understand that this is what they've done to the public. They told the public time and time and time again, the same way that they did with the other issue that we just had over the past 4 years. If you tell the lie enough, it becomes the truth.
That's exactly it. That's
Right.
exactly it. And that's good about things right now, as bad as it is in Canada, and it is bad with the euthanasia issue because people have bought into a lie.
Right.
But what's good about things is that lie is starting to unfold. It's starting to
Correct.
crumble. And this is very important. I'm going to go back to Zivit though for a second,
Please.
and this is a very important thing that he did. He talked about the luminous veil. Now, I
Mm.
didn't know enough. I knew all about the Golden Gate Bridge. I understood that
Yes.
the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco was the most common suicide site in North
Yes.
America. I knew that. But the luminous veil, the Toronto Bloor Street Viaduct Bridge, was the second most common site of
Yes.
suicide in North America previous to this wall, this type of a wall being placed along the bridge. So it made it impossible for people to jump. And so he
Mm-hmm.
explains in 2003, a suicide prevention barrier called the luminous veil was installed at Toronto's Bloor Street Viaduct Bridge. Once in place, the barrier blocked people from jumping off the bridge. Obviously, that would have a major effect. Before this, the Bloor Street Viaduct Bridge was the second most common place in North America for suicide by jumping after the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. After the luminous veil was installed, not only did the suicide rate from the bridge fall to near zero, only two have taken place since 2003, but the overall rate of bridge-related suicide dropped in Toronto, meaning by removing that option of people jumping off the bridge to die by suicide, then in fact the suicide rate itself dropped.
Right.
Certainly that method of suicide dropped right off. Not to say that there weren't other bridges that people could have died from, but this was the known place, by removing that. So he says
Correct.
this finding might mean that when it is harder to die by suicide or to commit suicide, people choose not to.
Absolutely.
And I think this is very true with euthanasia. Now, why has euthanasia gone wild in Canada? It's gone insane.
It's
Now, first of all,
accessible.
I oppose euthanasia completely, and you guys know I oppose killing people. I think killing people is a serious, serious error in the culture, and it leads to serious, serious problems, and this is where we're facing. But if you go one step further, by making euthanasia very easy, which is what we've done, it then
Hmm.
becomes something that's becomes like the way to die,
Yes.
rather than being that last option, that last, that last thing that you could do when there's no other choices. It's become the first option for so many people, and this
It's a
to me is a very scary situation.
it's become a treatment option and not a last resort like the other Denmark and the part of the Netherlands as well. And that's the thing that you have to prove. So it's not that they got it right over there. It's that they have an attempt at safeguards that Canada just does not want to put into place. And I have a theory. I do really believe this has, and this can be quite conspiratorial for some individuals, but when you look at the data and when you look at the individuals, this is removing burdens from society. And I say burdens very loosely because I don't believe that anybody ever is a burden to society. I believe that when there is not proper healthcare, when there is not proper housing, when there is an overpopulation and bringing in of undocumented immigrants that put a burden, because that is a burden on a country's
Yes.
economic state, a medical system, one that was already crumbling. That's when you start to see people say, I am a burden on society. You have individuals like the Right to Life UK, that's been really fun to kind of get to follow. And they have had several individuals come forward and say, including Kim over in the UK and Starmer, and saying it's okay to tell your loved ones that they are a burden. They should consider suicide. The last I checked, and we've had this conversation before, but it's worth reiterating, counseling somebody for suicide, last I checked, is completely unacceptable behavior. It feels like dark manipulation. It also feels very reminiscent of Munchausen by proxy, whether you're a child or an adult at all.
Yes.
There is a sickness involved in that. And the thing we have to get others to understand is that mental health, depression, treatment-resistant depression, major depressive disorder, MS, schizophrenia, bipolar, you name it, all of these are not only, I want to say the word loosely, curable, manageable. And the reason I say that is because I've reiterated prior, I was diagnosed with PTSD, TBI, MDD, treatment resistant, every single thing they could slap a label around depression wise. And yet I'm on no pharmaceutical intervention. I use plant-based stuff from Good Living, and I do not do anything other than sleep, eat, work out, and make sure that my body is healthy. Because when you have a healthy environment, because it's very similar to if you take a fish out of a dirty fish tank and you put them back into a dirty fish tank, you're not going to have a happy fish. So you have to remove the fish from the dirty fish tank and put them in clean water. Very often their symptoms will go away. But when you have a media, and this is very easy to state because it's very provable and they've admitted it, a state-funded, state-run media by the Canadian government, you have them pushing on young minds that the idea is that we should be giving up when it's hard, that we should be taking pills instead of moving our body when we know it's 2 times more effective than taking an antidepressant or SSRI. And what we put in our body is 90% of the serotonin that goes to our brain. And we need to stop treating the body and the mind as if they are separate. So if we look at our environment, we are the sum of the 5. That is the 5 sounds, the 5 foods, the 5 people, the 5 places you go. If you are constantly in a negative feedback loop and you are constantly feeding yourself with these pro-death cult websites, like very much so like the individual that we helped get stopped by the 11th hour in British Columbia, who we know for sure, who has stated by her husband and herself that she had spent countless hours on pro-euthanasia sites and on pro-akathisia sites to not only justify her feelings, but to be fed by very sick individuals. And furthermore, when you take people like Kenneth Law, so if people don't know who Kenneth
Yes.
Law is, do yourself a favor, go check it out. When you
Well,
have,
he's challenging all this, as you know.
of
He's
course
gone
he
to the
is,
courts saying that he did nothing wrong. It's only free
right?
speech. Only
Okay,
free speech, okay?
but here's the beautiful thing: we don't have free speech in this country, so please, good luck. So when somebody says that we have free speech in Canada, we absolutely do not. We can go and reference my yesterday's post, how I got a strike on YouTube due to using said free speech. So I digress. Kenneth Law is a sick individual, an individual who wants to cause harm to others and cause others to take their own lives. When you have
Yes.
an individual who is speaking in someone's ear, think of it like the devil and the angel. For those that don't understand, the difference is the devil is winning, and it's not, this isn't a religious component. This is just an analogy. The light and the dark. When the dark starts to speak louder and then you start to feed it, it's going to justify to you all of your decision making around, well, I shouldn't live anymore. The other thing, Alex, that I think is really important to reiterate, MV and WV in Alberta, this is a
Yes.
similar type of case where one individual made a suicide pact, and that individual was fed information by Googling and constantly being
Yes.
fed negative feedback. And as if that wasn't going to affect her. Of course, it's going to affect a young mind. And the thing that gets me is the majority of individuals that are younger that I've spoken to who have gone through this process, I think there is a dissolution happening when it comes to what the end means and the permanence of death. And brought to you by Ketone IQ. If you guys have not heard or seen me drinking these little bottles right here, you have been missing out. These guys right here are single-handedly the biggest part of my routine. Outside of the functional mushrooms, the movement, the sleep, the hydration, Ketone IQ is a number one most important tool that I use in my toolbox. And let me tell you why. If you guys have never experienced runner's high, give this a try. That flow state, it is for real. Ketones are a uniquely powerful macronutrient that can cross the blood-brain barrier, and they increase the brain energy efficiency. And every time you take a Ketone IQ, you're going to notice the radical boost in performance, endurance, and just focus in general. For me, I use this when I road bike, when I run. As a mother, instead of using caffeine after 12 o'clock, I go and grab a ketone. More importantly, I use it before I podcast, before I do keynotes or anything important in my life. You will see a ketone in my bag, on the table, or anywhere near me. So do yourself a favor. Once you're done listening to this awesome episode of the Kelsey Sharon Perspective, go on over to the website partner.ketone.com/Kelsey. You're going to save, go grab yourself a subscription so you never miss out and you always have the energy you need. Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by Good Livin'. I am so excited to tell you about something that's become such a meaningful part of my wellness routine, Good Livin'. Now, this isn't any brand. This is actually a brand I know all of the owners behind. And let me tell you, their integrity, their dedication, and their quality is the real deal. Their microdosing and functional blends are crafted with intention, and you can feel it. Everything is tested and made to support you in tapping into your own rhythm. We're talking about blends for anxiety, depression and stress, ADHD, brain health, inflammation, sleep, and energy. Seriously, they have thought of everything possible. I know firsthand how much love they pour into every single product. So if you're ready to check them out and explore more, go to itsgoodlivin.com. And trust me, it's a journey worth taking. That's itsgoodlivin.com, itsgoodlivin.com. And make sure to use the code BRASS and get 20% off your first order today. And brought to you by XXXY Athletics. You guys can check them out at xx-xyathletics.com and make sure you use the code Kelsey20. That will help you save. I'm so excited to be a new ambassador of XXXY. I absolutely love what they stand for, and I'm proud to work with them because they are founded on truth, dedication to quality, and they are built for style and performance. Women deserve the opportunities that sports and single sex spaces provide because sex matters at the end of the day. It is the single biggest determinant of athletic performance. And it's completely unfair and dangerous, as most of you know, to allow males who are XY chromosome to compete with girls and women who are XX in sports. You guys can share your stories just by doing the hashtag workout speak out. Tag myself, Kelsey_Sharon, and the XX_XY athletics on Instagram, and we will share everything. We need to get fit and speak our minds, mobilize into a force that fights back for women's sports. So start fighting. The way that you do that is go to XX-XY Athletics, go use the code Kelsey20 at checkout, slap on that gear, signal to the world that you are done allowing others to walk into female spaces. I believe in this brand. I believe in the mission. I believe in what they do. So go grab some now.
Yes.
Yes.
No, and you're talking about MVWV, and maybe
Yes.
people aren't knowing exactly what you're talking about. That was the case in Calgary of the 27-year-old autistic woman who's 28 now, who had been approved for euthanasia, but she had no medical condition,
Right.
and even she was claiming she told the doctors that she had pain that was uncontrolled pain. But even that, the doctors found no source or reason or anything. There's nothing wrong with this woman. Like, pain could be coming from multiple sources. I understand this, but there was nothing physically wrong with her in any way.
Right.
And so she had been approved to be killed. That would have been February 1st of 2024. She was supposed to die, but her dad went to court and said, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with my daughter. She's autistic. Now,
Right.
the autism's a very important point, because I say I have an autistic son. So when you're talking about someone who's going to these websites and hearing these or reading these things about how wonderful it is to have death and getting all into this concept that this is where I need to go, you have to understand how an autistic mind works, right? They are different in how my son and this young woman are different in how they relate to the stimuli around them. And so they're
Right.
very easily, or far more easy, are able to get into this sort of a mind frame, and getting them out of it is tough.
Yes. It's a
And
fixation.
I've mentioned to people before, my son is often, especially in the wintertime, he might call us saying he's really depressed. He hasn't done that this year, so I'm very happy. I'm really, really depressed, Mom, da da da. He'll be talking to my wife, right? And I really would like to, and I'm thinking of dying, and this is how he's going on. And you could tell he's really deep in, okay? And he's having a hard time getting out of his thoughts. And what is our response always? Well, we'll come over there. Let's go to dinner. Let's do something. Let's go. We're trying
Right.
to get him out of that mode.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not easy.
No,
No, that's not
it's
easy,
not.
but you can see how it's different. And then there's also people who have depression, people who
Yes.
naturally have whether it's a natural imbalance they have or whether it's related to many other things. It could be abuse they've experienced when they're younger,
Mhm.
etc. And they're going through all these depressive feelings. And now you're adding in the euthanasia component to this, and you're
Right.
selling it as this good death and this easy death, and then you're free of all your suffering. Of course, it's all a lie. It's
Absolutely.
all, and that's what I think Zivit was so important, mentioning about this whole thing
Absolutely.
about the bridge. They built the fencing
Yeah.
around the bridge so it's impossible to jump. Well, that not only prevented jumping off that bridge, but
Mm-hmm.
the numbers of suicides of the people jumping off any bridge dropped right off,
Which is
even though
which
there
is
are other bridges in
wild.
Toronto.
Absolutely. And there are a ton of bridges in Toronto that are more than high enough. And even just think about the amount of apartment buildings. You
Yeah,
don't have to be that high off the ground to nosedive and make yourself
yeah.
end your
Well, we
life.
have to be careful when we're talking about this, because some people are fed by these ideas and they're already caught up in it. And
My,
I'm very careful
I
with this.
understand.
I know.
I understand
And
that, but like when
I
you
had a
think
friend who
about it
died that way when I
consciously,
was
though,
younger, and
yeah,
and I just get this pain in my gut every time I'm talking about suicide. But anyway, you can see how the point of it is. The point of it is that
absolutely,
we've made it so easy. I think it's important that you brought up the MVWV case, because it was one of the cases that have actually helped to expose what's actually
yes,
happening in Canada. And the sad thing is that how could she? The question, because people were saying, "Oh well, why are you guys so upset? This was her choice." Well, wait a second.
no,
How could she have been approved? First of all, there's nothing
that's
wrong with
right,
this woman. She's autistic. That's sad. She was
right,
certainly suicidal. That's sad. Lots of people go through suicidal ideation. Do we just sort of say, "Oh, you're going through suicidal
hmm
ideation. We're going to give you a lethal injection. That's done." That's abandonment, isn't it? but it shows you
Yes.
where the culture was. Now, you mentioned something else which was important, and the whole thing. I think Dr. Weeb has really been a scary source, and
I
we
do
saw.
appreciate that you still call her doctor. I refuse.
Okay, I shouldn't call her doctor. It is Ellen Weeb, but she does have a doctorate in medicine, whether she should have
Yes.
ever had one or not. When you read my article that I wrote about it, this whole situation,
Mm-hmm.
I do call her Ellen Weeb, but later I
Yep.
mentioned the word doctor. But nonetheless, on December the 19th, the Canadian Press
Yes.
reported, now that's a while back now, but it's important because this is a long-term case that's going on. And then
Yes.
there was a case filed in the BC court about a businessman who died by euthanasia at her clinic in
Mm-hmm.
December of 2022. He was on a day leave
Right.
for his psychiatric treatment. So he was in psychiatric care. He had a day pass and he died at Ellen Weeb's clinic. Now, Weeb knew he was
Yes.
living at the psychiatric ward of St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver. Here's a guy who's going through suicidal ideation. And you've
Mm-hmm.
got a family who were absolutely shocked
And devastated.
and devastated because this 52-year-old man who's otherwise healthy, even though yes, he's going through this situation of
Mm-hmm.
mental health, which is quite serious, he's killed.
Yeah.
He's killed by euthanasia. So they've taken this to court, not just to court, they're actually challenging the law itself. Now,
Mm-hmm.
here's the other problem with the law. Now, I'm opposed to killing in general, but this is another egregious case. And here you have the situation. How could Weeb have gotten away with this?
And this is not the
Honestly,
first time either.
no, this is not her first time. No, that's the other big thing. But how could she have gotten away with it? Well, first of all, you have no oversight of the law. So
Absolutely none.
remember, we did a show a couple months ago because in October, Ontario put out a report
Yes.
examining the euthanasia deaths in Ontario between 2018 and the end of 2023. And they showed that there was well over 400 cases in Ontario in that time of people who died by euthanasia, but it was outside. They were
Mm-hmm.
outside the parameters of the law. They were whether it was a minor infraction, such as there was no second doctor signing off. I don't consider that minor, but you know what I'm saying. Or it was
Yeah.
someone who clearly did not fit the criteria of the law. There was no proof that they had any sort of condition, etc.
Right.
There were some very egregious cases in that whole report. But BC doesn't even bother examining them like this. And
No.
the person who's the head of the committee, so they do look at the cases in BC, so don't get me wrong, they do have a committee that looks at the cases. They've never put out a report.
Who's all pro euthanasia though?
The person in charge is one of the key euthanasia doctors in Canada, is running the whole BC Oversight Commission. So there's no oversight. So Weeb can kill somebody who's on a psychiatric day pass, whose family's actually shocked. They've charged with wrongful death, which is
Mm-hmm.
very accurate. But the problem with the law also is not only no oversight. The law says, and I've been saying this from the very beginning in 2016 when we legalized euthanasia, I told every single MP over and over again, you cannot pass a law the way it's worded. One of the
Yeah.
reasons was it said that the doctor only had to be of the opinion you fit the
Correct.
criteria of the law. And Weeb is well aware that it's impossible to prosecute her with homicide after she kills someone because once she has signed off and got another doctor or nurse practitioner to sign off, once she's done that, the law says it's fine because she only has to say, I was of the opinion that this person fit the criteria of the law. That's insanity. You know, it's so insane. And there's nothing good about the Dutch euthanasia law, but it doesn't say that.
Right.
The Dutch euthanasia law doesn't use this term, the doctor only has to be of the opinion.
The
It doesn't
opinion.
do that. So even in the Netherlands, where there's been very few attempted prosecutions, there actually has been a prosecution in the Netherlands that was successful. Because of course they said, well, this was outside of the practice of the law.
Correct.
Not to say that the Dutch law has excellent oversight. I'm not saying any of the sort. I'm just saying in
But
Canada
it's
it's
better than
impossible.
Canada.
It is better than Canada, and so we're talking now about minutia. But it shows you this was another case that had this showing you what's the problem. And then there was the case that you mentioned, the case of the woman from Alberta who went to British Columbia and her common
Doctor
law
shocked.
husband was able to prevent that euthanasia death. So this woman's euthanasia death was scheduled for October 27th, 2024. Dr. Weave had approved it, was going to do that euthanasia death, and then the court granted a 30-day injunction to prevent that death.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been, from I could tell, you would know better than I because you were
Yeah.
more closely related to this particular case, that she remains alive today. But in that case, again, she did not have an irremediable medical condition. So therefore, technically, she should have never been approved. Not to say that I think that's a good definition. There's nothing good about the definition, an irremediable medical condition. What does that mean? It's nothing personal, but many of us have irremediable medical conditions. Does that
Mm-hmm.
mean we're good to be killed? Like, honestly. And it's not
Evidently,
just
if you
about,
go by the language, it does mean that, though.
it does mean that. And how do you define irremediable? Well, you can't actually define it. It's a law that cannot be defined. But the fact of it is you're seeing all these cases, and that's just the how would you say, the tip of the iceberg. And
So,
why do I call it the tip of the iceberg? Because once a person's dead, the only remaining witness to the death is the doctor who killed you.
right. And the reason that's so eerie to me is because if we take it back to that individual that you're speaking of, that doctor shopped her way to Ellen Wiebe in British Columbia, was not from the
Right.
province
Yep.
whatsoever, which is very reminiscent of kind of what's happening in America right now with people not understanding how you have to be a resident or you don't, and you can get the drug and you can go. Anyway, we're going to get into that. But the thing that blows my mind about that particular case, which is really fascinating, is it just illustrates how Ellen works the system. So to give you an example, she approved this individual over the very first Zoom call. And instead of having a secondary doctor examine the patient or even examine them in person, because you're not even allowed to prescribe drugs without having an individual in the room to check their blood pressure, ask them their medical history and their contraindications of medication. But yet this individual could do a Zoom call with someone and then have a secondary doctor never speak to that individual, never ever see medical records, approve them, which means that it's not just, and this is something I really want to start diving into, it's not just Ellen Wiebe, it's whomever Ellen is using as a secondary practitioner to
That's
do this.
exactly
And
it.
why haven't we discussed the individual that stands behind Ellen? Because, we know for a fact, because she stated in the National Post, she's killed over 400 people. That was as of 2022. If we are able to track her death record, she has to be in the thousands by now, just based on her long-term attempts at murdering individuals all the way back to 2016. And God knows what she was doing illegally prior to that. And that's allegedly, but I am aware, like Dying with Dignity has said in 1994 in the court cases, that they had been doing this prior. And with Joel Zivit, Dr. Joel Zivit, one of the things him and I have discussed is the double blind. So there is people and doctors who will quietly say to the family, I will up the medication, the heart will slow, and that is how the individual goes. So whether it's put under the guise of using the term MAID or euthanasia on a death certificate, individuals have died. We know doctors in the gray area. We also know Kathleen Christensen, who runs Valor Law, used to be a 20-year nurse. She goes, we would do it all the time because the family member would see suffering. If I see you suffering, I'm upping the drugs. If I up the drugs, this is the repercussions. Is everyone in understanding of this? And it was a normal thing that happened in the medical system. So these are just the numbers, number one, that we can track. And this is a self-reporting system. So let's also discuss that. This is a self-reporting system.
Right. So how the system works is Ellen, who then does the killing, she's the one by law who has to send in the report. So the report that is received by, in this case, is the BC Ministry of Health. So in Ontario, it's the Ontario Coroner's Office. So every province has a little bit of a different system for how it's collected. Nonetheless, Ellen Wiebe would send in the report on the person she killed. So it's a self-reporting system. Therefore, if Ellen is going to, how would you say, make the information look better than it was, then obviously speaking, it'd be very difficult to actually find the information. That's why I mentioned earlier that in this homicide death, the other witness is dead. So therefore, the only information we have is by the doctor who killed you. In these deaths, obviously, like this one also that I'm referring to, the man who was on his psychiatric day pass, nobody else is with him. It's not like his wife was with him. It's not like he brought one of his children with him to be there at his death. There's only one witness, and that's Ellen Wiebe. Now, possibly she's got someone in her clinic who might have been there, but they're all part of that same cabal of killers. Now, I'm going to mention one other case that happened a few years ago, and this is one that she admitted to. So CAMAP is the
Yes.
organization of training. They receive well over $3 million a year from our federal government to train doctors to do euthanasia. So CAMAP is run by certain key euthanasia doctors, including Stephanie Green from Victoria, who's been one of the key CAMAP people. Anyway, Ellen Wiebe said in this CAMAP seminar, so this was an online seminar
Mm-hmm.
that she said it was dealing with a patient who had been turned down for euthanasia, actually in Ontario. This person had been turned down in Ontario. The assessors in Ontario had said this person did not qualify, and this person was assessed on multiple occasions in Ontario and turned down. It's not like Ontario has no euthanasia deaths, and oh, by the way, it's
They're
so
building a MAID
restrictive in
house.
Ontario. But anyway, Ellen Wiebe approved this person online, virtually, found the person eligible. It's a him. I got the second assessor to agree. Now, in the case of Ellen Wiebe, she's got a couple doctors, or one in particular, who constantly signs off on all the documents anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Do we know who that is?
I think we could probably find out pretty easily. I've never actually bothered to look at it. There was actually, funny enough, because it requires also these documents require a witness. There was a woman, and I should find the articles for a few years ago. I did blog it. There was a woman who wrote an article a few years ago about how wonderful it was that she was working with Stephanie Green. So this is just a woman who was the witness who came with Stephanie Green all the time in order to sign the papers as the
Right.
witness, because you need to have an unrelated witness, right? So this is a person who was all excited about all these killings she had been involved in. Anyway, in this case, Ellen arranged for this guy to fly to Vancouver, and she's saying this on this CamApp video recording. She picked him up at the airport, she brought him to her clinic, and she provided him euthanasia. So imagine this. This is someone who was turned down by his own doctors in Ontario, told that there was two reasons he was turned down. According to the documents, he was turned down because he did not have an ability, proper capacity to make decisions, according to the one doctor. Another doctor said that the illness was not serious enough. So you have these rejections based on illness is not serious enough, questionable capacity. We approves them by virtual, by Zoom type thing or whatever, and then has him fly to Vancouver, picks him up at the airport, and kills him at the clinic in that same chair that was in that one TV show that she was showing off her
With Better
euthanasia
Off
chair.
Dead.
Yeah, that's right. The Better Off Dead documentary by Liz Carr.
So great. It's that point.
This is something that people don't understand. This whole will to kill.
Not only just will to kill, will to go outside the boundaries, to inconvenience, to go outside the medical system, to go outside of her personal life, to take time out of her personal day away from her family, away from her loved ones, which, oh my God, I'm so sorry that you're related. And to go and pick up an individual at the airport, then drive them down to West Broadway where her clinic is, and then walk them into a building for them to never walk out again. I'm also curious to know, because I feel like there's going to be coroners out there who pick up at her clinic quite frequently. I'd be genuinely curious to know from one of these coroners who would like to whistleblow how many they've picked up in the past, I don't know, 24 months from that clinic. And let's try to line up those medical death certificates to see if we line up, because I have a funny feeling they won't.
So I'm announcing right now that starting the week, well, it'll be mid-January, we're starting a major petition across Canada. We want the BC Health and the Office of the Physicians and Surgeons of BC to do a complete investigation into all the euthanasia deaths by Ellen Wiebe. Because here's the point. There are several cases. Now, why do I say it's the tip of the iceberg? Because obviously you only hear of the cases that you've got a complaint from.
Right.
And you're not going to get complaints from every case. I'll give you another quick story. I got a call, and this is actually a Stephanie Green death. I got a call from somebody in British Columbia who was all upset because his aunt died by euthanasia. She was 92 years old, but she had no health condition. He was absolutely shocked. She was elderly. She was pro-euthanasia, though. He was quite clear. Yes, she was a member of Dying with Dignity, the whole thing. She dies by euthanasia. He was absolutely upset. There was no, he says she's very elderly. But she had no health condition. And so I said to him, okay, I'm willing to send a film crew there to film you talking about your aunt, because he says, I visited my aunt every week. I knew her well. I knew that she wasn't sick, she wasn't dying, there was no problem with her, but she decided maybe she was going through depression, maybe she was having some difficulties, like whatever it was, she was certainly involved with Dying with Dignity in the membership side, so maybe she was thinking it was her time to go. But he
Hmm.
just couldn't believe, how did my aunt die by euthanasia? That was his question to me. And so I called him back the week later saying, I'm pretty sure I can have arranged this. I can come down there. We could do an interview with you and everything. He says, no, my family has said, stop talking about it. My
Oh.
family has said, stop talking about it. He says, they're all upset because they're saying, hey, it's done with, leave it alone. I'm getting all this pressure from my family. He says, so I just don't want to talk about it anymore. And that is not an uncommon situation,
Right.
not because, oh, people are cowards and everything, but you're talking about a pretty upsetting situation here. Your aunt dies
Absolutely.
by euthanasia. You're visiting her all the time. There's absolutely nothing wrong with her other than she's 92. I did write up the story because
Yep.
I said, well, can I publish your email to me that you first sent me before I called you up and talked to you? And he says, yeah. So I did write up your story. I did protect the names. I know it was Dr. Stephanie Green who did it. But anyway, the fact of it is that no one wants to talk about it because of the whole familiar issue of,
Hmm.
well, we don't want to talk about that. That's too much. That's you're causing people to be upset about this. She's gone now, etc., etc. So when we talk about the tip of the iceberg, remember, it's a lot of families that are saying, whatever happened may have been right or wrong, but let's leave that alone. You know,
See,
Uncle Jim is dead.
That's such a Canadian response, though, Alex. That is such a shoved down your throat. How dare you, manipulated to crush not only you or your voice. That is such a communistic way to go about life. And people don't like that term. Well, get fucking comfortable. Because that's really what that is. When you suppress language, when you suppress information, when you
Yep.
suppress knowledge, this is where the dark grows. This is why Stephanie and Ellen and Dying with Dignity and all the other pro-death cults in the UK and everywhere else that is pushing this message, this
Yep.
is why they've been able to gain traction, is because when you silence the oppressed, when you tell them it is unsafe for you to speak up, whether that's threat of legal action, whether that is threat of the family no longer communicating with you. We've seen this playbook before with religious cults where somebody will be shunned if they've done something. We've seen this with government officials who
Yep.
will take down social media pages, who will censor, like Bill C-11. They will do whatever
Yep.
they can to make sure these stories don't come out. And the reason why, just going back briefly
Sounds
to
like
the
you're talking about the Trudeau government. Sorry.
Oh, you mean the Trudeau? You mean the man that just stepped down? So it's 100% the Trudeau government, because when we had Harper, there was no such thing as Bill C-11, Bill 63. There was no reason for people like Jordan Peterson and Gad Saad to leave the country. There was no reason for Viva to leave. There's no reason for me to leave. But now we are living in a very different time where individuals like ourselves are no longer safe here. Our bank accounts aren't safe here. Our homes are watched. People like CSIS have become involved in our lives. When you have your
Okay.
own FBI monitoring individuals, it is a problem.
It's not only the FBI, but we've had this conversation, you and I, but I'm not going to share this doctor's name. But there's a doctor I know
Please.
who's very much involved with trying to stop the push of euthanasia,
Of
and she has the death people following her around.
course.
She talks about how she went out for a run recently, and this car followed her. Now
What?
she talks, yeah, she's telling me that she's very careful what she puts in her recycling because they go through her garbage
Yes,
because they're trying to shut her down. So they've
absolutely.
decided that because she's been a strong and effective voice, I'm not sharing her name because no one
Please
needs to know
don't.
her name.
No.
Because she's such a strong and effective voice, they're trying to find whatever they can. And
Mm.
they're first of all, by having a car following around, she goes to her medical clinic, and sometimes she sees this same person, the same car, or this group of people. They're following her, they're bothering her. She sees people when she's going to lunch, and she's saying they're trying to intimidate her first of all. And she says, it's getting to her, but she's not going to stop. But they're
Right.
trying to find stuff in her garbage. Why? Because they want to be able to say, oh, this person, really,
Mm.
you can't listen to her
Right.
because,
Right. Like they
well,
do to
that's
me. It's
ridiculous. They're
cute.
they're trying to shut her down,
Yeah.
and that's insane. This is a person who's a family. This is a
Right.
person who is a phenomenally compassionate person who cares
Hmm.
about people, and they're going after her. And then they're all worried about privacy as if I'm going to go after somebody. I'm not going after anybody.
Why
I
would
want the
you?
law to do their job,
Right.
but I'm not going after anybody. You don't see me going after anybody.
We're not going after anybody. We're
No.
doing what the majority, and I mean this out of the
When something's
utmost
published
respect.
about somebody, I will republish it and I'll say, hey, look, this is a serious problem. How come nothing's being done about this?
This is what happens, and this is why it's so important. We're not, number one, let's just start with this. Anytime I've spoken about these individuals, I have done it from America. Let's start with that, because the freedom of speech law holds there.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
any defamation and any of that, everything that has been stated emphatically on the Kelsey Sharon podcast, on trigonometry, or on Jordan Peterson that has come out of my mouth, not only comes from public sources, comes from government documents, the Senate of Canada, the National Post, and or the BMJ or the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition's blog, who has then cited, Alex has cited everything. So when you publish books like Stephanie Green has on talking about how many people she's killed and how it's so beautiful and telling the stories, when you have Ellen Wiebe go on Better Off Dead with Liz Carr, when you have her go speak on the National Post or the New York Times, these are public sources. So the thing that they hate, and just like Ellen said right before Christmas, the greatest gift I would have is if they would just stop talking. So when you stop talking, people like Ellen Wiebe get the opportunity to take people from St. Paul's who are on day passes, psychiatric day passes, and allow them to come knowing full well that that individual was on a psychiatric day pass. One of my new neighbors, by the way, works at St. Paul's and is a psych nurse. And I said, well, where do you work? She goes, St. Paul's. And I said, what department? She goes, the psych department. And I looked at her and my face just got gaunt. And she goes, well, why do you do that? I said, I work to prevent euthanasia. And she looked at me and she knew that I knew that she knew that I knew. And it was this weird standoff moment. I went, all right, I'm going in the house. Like there's this Canadians, I love you, Canada. But for fuck's sakes, you have to start talking, because at this point, when cars start following us around, like, I don't know, Scientologists, because that's how Dying with Dignity's cult is acting, it's insane. And furthermore, if you think that this is just onesie, twosie donors, why don't you go check out the Dying with Dignity donor list from 2023 and see some of the largest corporations, Catholic institutions, Jewish institutions, which of course, and all of the others who have a ton of money, who you would think would be sanctuaries for the dying and against the religious side of things, yet they are the ones supporting Dying with Dignity.
Why would Pfizer need to give them so much money?
I don't know. Maybe the drugs they use are from there.
Could be.
Could be. Alex, you know, the thing that blows my mind, I want to go back to the, we were talking about the Zivit one off the top, but like, let's briefly, we've got about 10 more minutes, but let's briefly, I'd like to go through, because the majority of my listeners at this point are definitely not from this country, are for sure from America. I would like to bring up the Hawaii murder investigation, because if you guys are not aware, there are 10 states, one jurisdiction, and expansion happening in America as we speak. So let's talk about the Hawaii murder that you wrote about, please.
So just recently, there was a doctor in Hawaii who's been charged with homicide, murder, in the death of a woman who was 88 years old, who was dying by assisted suicide. So assisted suicide in the Hawaii is a little different from euthanasia in Canada, in the sense that it has to be a self-administered death, meaning you have to do it yourself. In this case, the person was choking on the drugs, on the poisons. And so the doctor continued by forcing these drugs into this person. And and according to the report, so there must have been a family member there, or a friend or somebody. Everything, once again, in the court summary, does not list any names or anything. It's the same thing as in these Canadian cases. They intentionally wipe out the names and say, well, this is all in their privacy. But this homicide investigation is based on the fact that the woman wasn't able to swallow. The doctor then injected this woman, or forced this drugs into this poison to this woman. But on top of it, the woman said, "Stop it." The woman said, "Stop it."
She said,
and
"Stop."
It continued. Stop. The woman said, "Stop."
This is so Alex, I have to interrupt. This is so reminiscent of the case in Denmark with the grandmother with the coffee that the doctor drugged, and then the family held her down.
That's actually a Netherlands case.
Netherlands, sorry, the Netherlands case. But the coffee, that is going to stick with me for the rest of my life, because the fact that a family member held her down, as she said, no, and now we have another case very similar in Hawaii, stating, I'm saying no.
that the woman said stop, and the doctor continued. So this doctor has been charged with a homicide. Now, of course, these are all alleged charges. It's not gone to court yet, and things like that. But why is this so egregious in the reality of, hey, this woman was asking for assisted suicide? Why shouldn't the doctor go ahead and kill her? Because he's just completing the act, right? They're just completing the act. Well, it's a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more than that if you start thinking about it, because it shows you right off the bat the problem with all of these laws. So similar to Canada, where it's a self-reporting system, Hawaii, Oregon, Washington State, Vermont, all these states that have legalized assisted suicide also use that same self-reporting system. So it's very possible that there are many homicide deaths in the name of assisted suicide. It's
Mm-hmm.
very possible that there are, but we would never know, because the law is designed to do what? To protect the doctor who's involved with killing people. The doctor is not only saying, I will prescribe the lethal poison, the doctor is also saying, I agree your life's not worth living. And the doctor, when they're at their death, might feel the need to complete the act. Now, in the US, it's a little different. Compassionate Choices is the big group in the US, and they admit that over 90% of the assisted suicide deaths in the state of Oregon are done by them. Okay, so they admit it. Now, why do they admit it? It's part of their fundraising campaign. They say, give us money, donate money to us.
We kill the most people.
We are the ones carrying out these assisted suicide deaths in Oregon. So how does it work in Oregon is that someone might be wanting to die by assisted suicide, or interested, or trying to find out information on assisted suicide. They will then be referred to Compassionate Choices. Compassionate Choices then sets them up with a pro-death doctor, and the pro-death doctor then does the assessment, the approval, and then the writing of the lethal prescription. Now, in Oregon, same as in Hawaii, the doctor's usually not at the death. But if you look at the data from Compassion Choices, they admit that most often, actually, it's the Compassion Choices volunteer who's at the death. So what does that mean? They've trained people to sit beside someone to make sure the act has been completed, right? Why is that important? Well, the problem with these drugs are they're horrible. These are
Mm-hmm.
horrible drugs. When you read anything about these drugs, they do exactly the same thing as with the euthanasia drugs, except you have to take them by mouth,
Orally. Yeah.
orally. Now, you can do it by an IV, but then you have to start the IV, obviously. But if you're
Correct.
taking it orally, these are horrific caustic drugs. They burn your throat. They taste awful, awful, awful. And what they're finding is a lot of the people, because the drug combination is to put you into coma, is to put you into a paralysis, and then to have your lungs shut down, because it's set up that way. If you take a bit of the drug but don't finish off the full
Mm-hmm.
dose, but now you have gone into coma, according to the system of assisted suicide, no one can actually then force it into you, because it's supposed to be a self-administered death. That's how the law is written, right? So
But
you do have
how?
So then they complete the act. So after you see a completing of the act going on, or hear of a completing of the act. Now, why am I talking about this? I went to a Dying with Dignity conference a few years ago, and I was having lunch. I thought I'd be going to a conference where I'd be sitting around the table with a bunch of people who really don't share my point of view. What I met was something very different from that. I met a bunch of people who were involved with killing people. You would say,
Wow.
oh, Alex, don't be so rude. They're not killing people. This is MAID. This is assisted suicide. These are
No.
compassionate people. No, they were actually involved with killing people. So
They
they're
kill
talking.
humans.
They're killing humans. But they're sitting around the table at lunch talking about the deaths they've done.
It's
And the one woman,
disgusting.
I'm serious. I'm not making this up. Uh, you know, the one woman says, well, we had a problem because she was actually doing it to her mother this time. She was just talking about this, and she said,
Oh
well,
my God.
well, she wasn't dying. Now, we see this in the data, that there are some people it takes 3 or 4 days. Last year, the longest time of death in Oregon was 137 hours. 137 hours. Do the
Oh.
math, okay?
That's okay. That's like that's cruel and unusual punishment, is what that is.
Absolutely. Think about that. You're laying in a bed in coma all this time as you're dying, and you're like, there are some people who have come out of it and then said,
Right.
what the hell happened to me? But anyway,
Right.
and she's saying she wasn't dying. So she says, I had to use the pillow. I'm sitting
Oh
there at
my
lunch.
God.
I wasn't beside the woman. She was just over from me, and she's talking about, well, I never admitted to anybody I used the pillow, but she obviously felt comfortable in this crowd around us,
You're
because there were
wearing a
deaf people.
microphone for now on, Alex. You are married. Listen, I'm sending you a road mic, and for the next extended, every time you go to one of these, you are wearing this in your pocket.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I should go to anyway, but the point of
Let's
it
go
is
together, Alex.
we should go together. So you'd be shocked because they're telling their stories. But I'm not lying to anyone. She says I had to use the pillow. So when I'm talking about completing the act, sometimes of course they wait, and obviously when you've taken this lethal poison, after a period of time you're going to die. Whether it takes 12 hours, 24 hours,
Right.
36 hours, or 137 hours, you're going to die. But some people are uncomfortable with waiting so long, so they will complete the act with a pillow. So anyway, getting back to this homicide thing in Honolulu, I don't think this is the only case. I just think this is the only case that was witnessed.
Right.
And not only witnessed, there might have been other cases witnessed, but this is the only case where it was witnessed and people were shocked by it. I'm going to make one other comment because we're running out of time soon. I got a
Yes.
call yesterday from a woman, a Canadian woman, and she was shocked because she has an elderly mother who has some health conditions, but her mother has been getting better. So she had some heart conditions. She was in the hospital. She was still in the hospital when I talked to her yesterday, but she was soon to be released. She got a call from the doctor. Now think about this. Think about this within the concept of euthanasia. Now, they weren't actually talking about euthanasia, but it's a very similar concept. She gets a call from the doctor, and the question to her was, well, we think the best thing for your mother would be that we just put her into palliative care and we just have her go. Or do you agree? This was the question to the daughter. So the daughter's calling me up, says, I can't believe, Alex, I just got this phone call from the doctor that my mother is going to be released from hospital. A few weeks ago, she was in pretty rough shape, but she's actually looking pretty good right now.
Right.
And I said to her, the problem with your mother is not that she's not getting better, is that she did get better.
How
That's
horrific.
the problem with your mother. The doctor's thinking, don't you think it's better that we just, do your mother in? It's going to take 2 or 3 days. We're just going to up the dose and she'll be gone in 2 or 3 days. And this woman's shocked. She says, I told the doctor right away, absolutely not. My mother's coming home. What are you talking about? And you'd be thinking, what has this got to do with the euthanasia culture? Well, think about a doctor who's involved with killing people, and now you have this woman who is getting better, but obviously she is quite elderly. I'm not going to give you her age. I'm not going to give you more information. You don't need any more information.
Nope.
But she's quite elderly. She had a serious heart issue that she's now gotten better from. She's coming home. She's not returned to the way she was previous to her heart issue. That's true. Absolutely. But she's getting better. She's fine. You can communicate with her. She's okay. She's happy to be alive. And her daughter wants her to be alive. Her daughter wants to be around her. And they're saying, maybe we should just do her in.
It's the mindset. We've given up. We've quit on people.
Well, now you start thinking about euthanasia and what we're doing to people.
It's because we told our society that it's easier to die than it is to live and to fight on until your natural death. And I get it. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes it's horrific. But how dare we?
It was important to talk about the Hawaii thing. This is a murder case, and I don't think it's the only one that's ever happened. I think there's been lots of them. Just so you know how crazy the death people are. You know how in the U.S. they, the new regime doesn't come in until so you had the election. So in Illinois, this next week, this week right now, you have the old regime who are basically in place until the new regime takes their place in the Illinois General Assembly. And there was a big push by the Senator Linda Holmes, who sponsored SB 3499, which is the assisted suicide bill. She was trying to get it through this week because it is the lame duck session.
Yes.
She wanted it through this week. Now, from what I've read, she has not accomplished her goal.
Good.
But think about this whole thing about a lame duck session. This is about killing people. And if you're thinking about this, people say, oh, Alex, this is a democracy.
No,
obviously, in these states where they've legalized assisted suicide, people wanted this. This Linda Holmes was pushing during the lame duck session before the new legislature comes in to try and legalize this. That's insane. It's all insane, but this is insane. Think about it.
We're not in a sane world, Alex.
This
is it a shock?
Not about democracy. This is about pushing death. This is exactly what's going on in these states, and they're pushing it everywhere. So anyway, you can come here again. I'm actually wanting to do some more speaking engagements. So hopefully people across Canada can hear in the future more talks between Kelsey and I, where we can go somewhere
Yes.
and do a talk and bring people in, because I think people have to be aware and be willing to talk about this.
How amazing
We
would that be to do a live podcast at a few events together, my friend?
we need to turn things around, and the only way
We
things
do.
are turned around is by talking about it.
That's right.
It's good that I have to watch what I say politically. I don't actually. We're not a charity.
No,
EPC
we're
is
not.
not a charity. But the fact of it is Mr. Trudeau is on his way out,
Yes.
and one of the best things we can do is start reversing all this
Yeah.
damage that he's done to our country. And I
Yes.
want to say one other thing to people. First of all, I'm opposed to killing people, so it's obvious what my position is. Okay, you
Mhm.
can say, "Oh, he's an uncaring person." No, I'm a very caring person. I just don't want to be involved in any way with killing people.
Mhm.
We need to care for people. But secondly, let's be brutally honest. There's a lot of people who fear a bad death. I agree.
Yes.
But we don't need to kill you.
No.
This is a society that should be involved with caring for you. One of the things we've done in our country is we've bankrupted our country. We've done all these things. We're now spending more money on our federal debt to service our federal
Yes.
debt than we're actually spending on healthcare. And then you're wondering why I'm saying to you, well, we don't actually have to kill you. We can properly care for you. And
Yeah.
why that actually should actually be really hitting home with people.
No,
Think
I
about
fully
this.
agree.
In 2023, we had the Health Canada report came out saying 15,343 deaths, and it said 622 non-compliant Canadian euthanasia deaths. So that's only the ones they identified.
That's terrifying. That's a
It's
terrifying
the tip
number.
of the iceberg. So
It
think about
is.
it. We need to stop the killing.
We do. I couldn't agree with you more, Alex. I definitely got to jump, but you and I will be back. We're going to be doing at least one of these a month. It looks like at least a few. So if you guys are not sure who Alex Schadenberg is, please go check out the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. He has an incredible blog maintained by him. We'll put everything in the show notes, and we'll be back again with another MAID series episode with Alex here soon. And I will also be speaking to Zivit about his newest article that he has written that I do recommend you guys go and check out. It is on MedPage today. If you put in the keywords to Britain on legalizing assisted death, proceed with caution. So go check it out. Everybody else, we will see you all next week.